wait for like 3 minutes or something to see if anybody that left won't come back and listen. Because this is a good book. Like, this is a good book. This is a good book. I enjoy writing this, though. I actually really enjoyed writing this. Well, they come back a little later. I don't think they really want this too much. Oh, look at the damn cat. Look at the damn cat. Lazy her. Lazy her. All right. The question of the day, of the night, is still: do you believe in karma? You can just say yes. You can just say no. You can say anything. It's still: do you believe in karma? And we on positive vibes in here. Let me write that. Oh, dude, I already did. Like the vibes on it. Okay. I'm gonna start it from the beginning. I'm gonna start it from the beginning. This is the Philly Commission by Kareem Abdul Rahman. Miss Jan, 1985. Who wants to come to the blackboard and solve the first equation? Miss Powell asked as she scanned the classroom for volunteers. Most of the students looked away or put their heads down, hoping not to be called on to solve the equation in front of the class. Miss Powell shook her head in disappointment when she saw this. They'd been studying this for weeks, and nobody seemed to be learning anything. Miss Powell suddenly broke out into a wide grin when she saw one little hand eagerly waving from all the way in the back of the classroom. Brian, you think you can solve this equation? Brian double-checked the work on his paper before he spoke. Yes, ma'am. Well, come up here and show me. Brian confidently walked to the blackboard. He knew he had the right answer, and he wanted to show Miss Powell that he knew it. Truth be told, fractions and multiplication was easy for him. It was almost too easy. As a matter of fact, any kind of math was easy to him. Brian was leaps and bounds smarter than everyone else in the class, and he loved taking every opportunity to show everyone exactly how smart he was. He had no idea how or why he picked up on math so easily. All he knew was that he loved counting, and that was all the motivation he needed. Brian easily solved the equation and walked back to his seat in the back of the classroom like it wasn't a big deal. He didn't seek attention or praise. All he wanted to do was let everyone know that he was the smartest person in the room. Brian was only in the 8th grade, but he was already sure that he knew where his life was headed, and he knew that adding and subtracting would be a big part of his life forever. Brian Kennedy was the youngest of 9 siblings. He had 4 sisters and 4 brothers. Brian and his family lived in a 3-bedroom house on 10th and Dauphin Streets in the heart of North Philly. The housing authority house that they now lived in was a major upgrade from the 2-bedroom apartment in the Fairhill projects that they'd been living in until 2 years ago. All of Brian's brothers and sisters had different fathers than him, except for... This was 1985. I don't know if they said that at the beginning, but this was 1985. His 15-year-old brother, Aiden. That was probably the reason that Brian was tighter with Aiden than he was with any of his other brothers and sisters. All 4 of Brian's brothers had been in and out of prison since they were 10 or 11 years old. Brian was the only one of his brothers who'd never seen the inside of a jail or any type of juvenile facility. Brian's mom tried her hardest to shield her youngest child from any kind of a life of crime. She encouraged her other children to make sure that he wasn't getting into any kind of trouble out in the streets also. Brian's mom had a special kind of love for her youngest child, but what she considered protecting him was only making him more curious about what was really going on out there in the street. Brian knew that his older brother sold drugs and hung out in certain spots around the hood, so he made it his business to avoid those spots and corners as him and his best friend Madman attempted to leave their mark on the neighborhood. Brian and Madman didn't commit any major crimes. Their thing was mostly vandalism, petty theft, and fighting. They never got caught, and that made Brian start to feel like this was what he was born to do. He wasn't going to do it like his older brothers who were always in and out of jail. He was going to do it the smart way, and at a very young age, Brian realized that education was the key to everything. Brian didn't go to school hoping to learn things so he could one day find a great job. Brian went to school hoping to learn things so he could one day be a great criminal. Brian attended Russell H. Conwell Middle School, which at the time was supposed to be a school for kids who were considered smart or gifted. Brian was taken out of his elementary school, John Hartranft, and placed in Conwell with the gifted kids. He begged his mom not to send him there because he wanted to go to John Wanamaker like the rest of his friends would be doing after elementary school. Ma Dukes would hear none of it. If her baby had an opportunity to get a better education for free, she was not going to pass up on it. Brian started Conwell Middle School after 4th grade at Hartranft Elementary. He decided right away that he was going to be a loner, and now, in his final year at Conwell, Brian was still a loner. That was how he wanted it. He was here to get an education, not try to blend in and hang with the cool kids. Why should he? As far as Brian was concerned, if this was a school for smart kids, then that meant that everybody here was a fucking nerd anyway. So what was the point? He would never hang with any of these weirdos outside of school. Brian figured that he would rather keep to himself. He created 2 personalities for himself: the street-savvy criminal and the book-smart nerd. Everyone Brian came in contact with in both worlds fell for his act, hook, line, and sinker. Nothing made Brian feel more powerful than the feeling that he was the smartest person in any room he walked into. He felt that this was true every time he fooled people into seeing him how he wanted them to see him. Russell H. Conwell was a school for gifted students, but being a school for gifted students did not mean that this was a school full of nerds who knew nothing about the streets, as Brian was soon about to find out. Miss Powell was impressed by how quickly Brian had picked up on the work, and she asked him to stay after class for a few minutes so that she could talk to him. Most of the students admired Brian for being so smart, but not all of his classmates looked upon him with admiration. Tracy had been in damn near every class with Brian ever since they both came to Conwell in the 5th grade. Tracy hated Brian from the moment he first saw him. At first, he didn't have any reason not to like him, except that he didn't like the way he looked. But over the years, Tracy felt like Brian was giving him a good reason not to like him. He thought that he was so much smarter than everyone else, and Tracy hated people like that. Tracy kicked Brian's desk on his way out of the classroom. Brian looked up from his schoolwork and gave Tracy a dirty look. Tracy looked back at Brian with hatred and dislike in his eyes. From that small exchange, Brian knew that it was on between him and Tracy. He knew that he was going to have to fade him sooner or later. Brian made a mental note to himself to get Tracy first before Tracy got him. Brian was going to catch him at the bus stop and tee off on him. He was not going to fight him on school grounds and risk being suspended from school. Conwell had a zero-tolerance policy for any kind of violence. Violators would more than likely be suspended from school and ultimately expelled. Brian put his books into his book bag and walked up to Miss Powell's desk. "You wanted to see me, Miss Powell?" Miss Powell looked up from the mountain of paperwork on her desk and smiled at Brian. Brian took a quick peek at Miss Powell's double D jugs that she always squeezed into her too tight for a 32-year-old teacher to be wearing in front of 13-year-old students' dresses. He quickly averted his eyes when he thought she noticed him staring at her breast. For some strange reason, Brian thought that he had a serious shot at getting into Miss Powell's drawers. Miss Powell removed her glasses and looked at Brian. "Brian, have you put any thought into which high school you want to attend after you graduate this year?" Brian rubbed his chin and thought for a minute before he spoke. "No, not really." Miss Powell shook her head. "Life lesson number 1, Brian. is to never try to bullshit a bullshitter. Don't try to run your game on me. You might have everyone else around here fooled, but I'm not the square that you might think that I am. Brian smiled. Every dream that he'd ever had about having sex with Miss Powell started out this way. He wondered if he was about to have sex with her right now. He had absolutely no idea what she was talking about when she said she wasn't the square that he might think she was. But he hoped that it had something to do with sex. Brian started to daydream about having Miss Powell's huge brown titties in his mouth. He wondered if she had the type of big-ass nipples that looked like a quarter. His daydream was interrupted by Miss Powell calling his name. Brian, did you hear what I said? Brian quickly snapped out of the dream and composed himself. He let out a nervous giggle. Yeah, I heard you, but I don't know what you mean. Miss Powell stood up from her desk and walked around to Brian. She put her hands on his shoulders, and he instantly got rock hard. She looked him directly in the eyes as she spoke. It means that I know you are too smart to not have any kind of plan for your future. You will be graduating in 5 months. Have you even applied to any high schools yet? Brian was instantly not hard anymore after she got finished speaking. He realized that his dreams were not going to come true today. No, I didn't apply to any schools. Miss Powell shook her head in disapproval. Why not? I don't know. I figured I was just going to wait and see what happens. Miss Powell shook her head again. You were supposed to do that last year. How did you think that you were going to get into a good school if you don't apply to any schools? Brian shrugged his shoulders. Miss Powell continued. Let me guess. You plan on not applying to any schools so that they can send you to your neighborhood high school, Thomas Edison, and you can be with your friends? Brian quickly put his head down, hoping to hide the surprise that was showing on his face. He wondered how Miss Powell had figured out his game plan. It was too late to try to hide his surprise. Miss Powell had already saw it in his eyes that she'd hit on his plans for the future. Miss Powell gently cupped Brian's face with both of her hands. Listen to me, Brian. I know that you've probably been told this over 1,000,000 times, but you are special. I'm not saying this just to say it. I'm saying this because it's true. You need to trust and believe this. If you go to a school like Edison, you're never going to be challenged as someone like yourself needs to be. You know what's going to happen then? You're going to get bored with school because you won't be getting challenged with the work. And once that happens, you will find some trouble to get into. I've seen too many young, intelligent kids like yourself make the same mistake and end up in prison or dead at a young age. Is that what you really want out of life? If it is, then you already know how the story ends. I'm telling you right now. But if you decide to journey down that other path, the possibilities for your future are endless. You can do anything in this world that you put your mind to. And who knows, you may even end up marrying a woman that looks like me. Miss Powell smiled and winked at Brian. He bust out into a wide grin. Miss Powell continued. I told you that I'm no square. I see the way you look at me. Anyway, the principal at Edward Bach High School is a personal friend of mine. I'm going to set up an interview for you at the school next week. I will even drive you over there myself. They have a great architectural program, and I'm almost sure that's something you might be interested in. Architects make good money. If you're not interested in that, I'm sure that you will find a shop at Bach that you are interested in. Miss Powell reached into her desk drawers and shuffled through the papers until she found the form that she was looking for. She passed the form to Brian. Have your mom sign this permission slip so I can take you up to the school next week. Brian took the form from Miss Powell. She gave him a hug. He enjoyed the feel of her soft breast on his face, and he was instantly hard again. Miss Powell knew what was happening, but she still let the hug linger on for a little longer than she should have. Brian would have stood there hugging her all day if he could. Miss Powell finally broke the hug and Brian picked up his book bag and headed out the door. Brian walked out of Miss Powell's classroom trying to hide the erection that had grown in his pants. As Brian walked out of the school and the blood started to flow back into his brain again, he thought about the conversation he'd just had with Miss Powell. What she said was true. People had been telling him that he was special ever since he could remember, but no one had ever broken it down to him the way that Miss Powell just had. When he started to think about things, he realized that she was probably right. He should go to a vocational school and pick up on some real life skills. Brian started to question the whole future he'd been mapping out for himself over the last 4 years. Was he really cut out to be a criminal? Was there really more to life? Could a person like himself really make it out of the hood without playing some type of sport or doing something illegal? He never witnessed anyone do it before, but the talk with Miss Powell was starting to make him seriously believe that anything was a possibility for him. Brian was so caught up in his thoughts that he didn't realize that he'd walked right past the bus stop. He walked into the little pizza shop so he wouldn't look dumb, just in case anyone had been watching him. He felt even dumber when he got inside the shop and realized he didn't have any money. Brian walked to the bathroom and took a piss. He had been so caught up in his thoughts when he walked into the shop that he hadn't noticed the enticing aroma of the smell of pizza. But now the smell was hitting him full blast, and he realized that he was starving. Brian couldn't wait to get around the way so he could steal something to eat from one of the neighborhood stores. A bag of chips or hell right about now. Brian hurried out of the shop so he could stop smelling pizza and teasing his stomach. As soon as he stepped out the door, he got nailed with a swift, powerful punch that landed square on his chin and put him on his ass. Brian was dazed, but he wasn't really hurt. He'd been hit harder than this plenty of times by his older brothers. Brian sat on the ground for a minute, trying to get his bearings back. He looked up and saw Tracy standing over him, talking all kinds of shit. At first, all he could see was Tracy's lips moving. He couldn't hear what he was saying because his ears were ringing. When his hearing came back to him, he caught the ending part of Tracy's rant. And if your bitch ass ever look at me like you want some fucking drama, I'ma stretch your bitch ass again. You pussy ass nigga. Tracy started to walk away. In the blink of an eye, Brian was on his feet and on Tracy's ass. He hit Tracy with a vicious 4-piece from behind that put Tracy on his ass. Tracy's homies that he was with looked on amazed, because just like Tracy, they all thought Brian was a pussy who wasn't going to do shit. Tracy got up from the ground and charged at Brian in an angry rage. The two mostly wrestled with a few punches thrown in here and there before some men working construction nearby came and broke up the fight. There was no clear winner of the fight, but one thing was made crystal clear to everyone who had witnessed the fight. Brian was not a pussy. He could fight a little too. He managed to hold his own with Tracy, who was much bigger than him. Tracy was pissed, not only with the fact that he hadn't clearly won the fight, but he also didn't knock out the light-skinned Brian. Tracy yelled at the top of his lungs as he was led away by the construction workers. This shit ain't over. Me and you gonna scrap every day until we get this shit right. Tracy refused to accept having a draw with a light-skinned dude. As far as he knew, light-skinned dudes were naturally soft. Where he was from, if a light-skinned dude had any kind of heart, everyone knew of him. He'd never heard of Brian in the street, so he refused to believe that Brian was not a pussy. Tracy was from North Philly, just like Brian. Tracy was born and raised on 7th and Pike Streets. Tracy had no idea that Brian was from North Philly, just like him. In the big scheme of things, they didn't even really live that far from each other. But to a 13-year-old kid who had never been out of the neighborhood, the distance from 7th and Pike to 10th and Dolphin, where Brian lived, was like the distance from the United States to Russia. Tracy didn't have a clue about anything outside of his neighborhood. That shit was foreign to him. Going to school every day was the furthest he'd ever traveled in the city. Tracy truly believed that his hood was one of a kind for the reason that damn near everyone in his hood was nice with their hands. It was inconceivable to Tracy that someone who once from his hood could fight. Especially a light-skinned dude that went to his nerdy-ass school. In Tracy's opinion, everyone who went to his school was a nerd who shouldn't be capable of knowing how to fight. In Tracy's eyes, being a nerd and knowing how to fight did not mix. He knew that he wasn't a nerd, and he knew that he was nice with his hands. He wasn't the same as everyone at the school. Tracy was not smart or gifted. That fact showed in class every single day. Tracy barely passed each year, and it was a 50-50 shot on if he would graduate this year. Tracy was not at Conwell because he was smart or gifted. Tracy cheated his way into Conwell Middle School. Tracy was the oldest of 3 kids. He was only 13 years younger than his mother, which in 1985 was still considered a little out of the ordinary. Tracy's mom was only 26 years old and nowhere near done with her partying ways. Tracy's mom hated Tracy's dad, who was now doing life in prison. She blamed him for trying to steal her youth and make her an old woman before it was her time. Since Tracy's dad was doing life in prison and she couldn't lash out at him, she took her anger out on Tracy. She called him dumb and told him that he wasn't going to be shit so much that he was starting to believe her. Tracy still secretly dreamed of proving his mother wrong. He wasn't dumb and he was going to be something when he grew up. He'd show her. Tracy's mom was not willing to go into adulthood without a fight. Even though she had 3 kids, she was only 26 years old. She had no plans of letting kids get in her way of having a good time every night. Tracy's mom left the babysitting duties up to him. He was responsible for his 10 and 6-year-old little brothers, while his mother went out partying every night. Tracy did as he was told, but Tracy, being Tracy, was always looking for a scheme or angle to play in any type of situation. He started to get his mother's nightly schedule down pat. She would leave the house around 8 or 9 p.m. If she was going to come home that night, she was always in the house before the bar closed at 2 a.m. If she wasn't in the house by 2, then she wasn't coming home until sometime the next morning. For Tracy, him learning his mother's nightly routine couldn't have come at a better time. In 1985, crack cocaine hit Tracy's neighborhood like a tidal wave, and he dived right into the game head first. Before crack had become the drug of choice in the hood, most people were selling heroin, weed, or powder cocaine. Before crack cocaine hit the scene, a person needed to be really connected to one of the old heads in the neighborhood to even get into the game. The old heads in the hood that controlled the heroin and powder didn't allow any old dumbass youngster to hustle for them. You had to have someone connected vouch for you or be known to have put in some type of work in the hood. Crack changed all of that. When crack came, the money was coming so fast that the dealers constantly had to hire new workers to keep up with the demand for the product. The need for more workers gave dirty little kids like Tracy an opportunity to get put on. It unknowingly paid off for the bosses in other ways too. If the kids got popped with drugs on them, it was only a minor charge for a juvenile. And most importantly, the boss didn't have to pay bail to get the youngster out of jail. All they had to do was send their mothers down to the precinct to get them out. This worked out perfectly for the crack bosses. The formula to hire youngsters was adopted throughout the city. From the minute the old head Ray gave Tracy his first $250 back, Tracy was addicted to hustling. Tracy got the $250 back from Ray when he got home from school at 4 p.m. By 5 p.m., he was done. He made $50 in an hour. For a 13-year-old, this was big money. Not the $50 he'd made, that was nothing. It was the possibilities to make more money every single day. Tracy quickly realized that the more time he put in on the corner, the more money he could make for himself. From the moment he was born, it seemed like Tracy did anything he could to try to get any kind of approval or love from his mother. It was the reason he cheated off of other people's test papers at school. It was the reason he switched papers with little Donnie when they took the test to attend Conwell Middle School. And it was the reason why Tracy sold drugs. Nothing he did ever seemed to be good enough for his mother. The only time she showed him any kind of love was when he was giving her some money. That love was only temporary because as soon as she'd spent all of the money he gave her, she stopped being nice to him. Tracy's mother tried to act like she was unaware that Tracy sold drugs, but she knew. She didn't really care either, as long as he had some money to give to her every night before she went out partying. Tracy went straight home from school after his fight with Brian. He was still pissed off. He couldn't wait to get to school tomorrow so he could properly beat Brian's ass. Tracy threw his book bag down near the front door. He heard his mother's loud voice calling him the minute he did. "Trey, get your ass in here, boy." Tracy sighed and headed for the kitchen where his mom was sitting at the table smoking a cigarette. The first thing he noticed was that she had a suitcase sitting next to her. That was odd. He was immediately suspicious. "Where are we going at, Mom?" His mom looked at him like he was crazy. "We ain't going nowhere. I'm going to Atlantic City with Mr. Bill for a few days. I need you to take care of your brothers and make sure that they go to school while I'm gone. I don't give a fuck what your dumb ass do." Tracy looked down at his feet. He wondered why his mom always had to be so mean and hurtful. He started to head up to his room. His mom called him back. "Boy, get your ass back over here. I ain't finished talking to you." Tracy walked back over to his mom. She continued talking, but her voice had suddenly got very soft and loving. "Give your mommy some money, Trey." Tracy was actually happy that his mom was asking him for some money. To him, that meant that she loved him. "How much you want?" She thought about it for a minute before she spoke. "Just give me everything that you got." Loud tone again. "Don't you fucking look at me like that. Your dumb ass wouldn't have even been born if it wasn't for me." Tracy's mom caught herself and calmed down before she continued. "I'm going to gamble and I need the money. I'll give you back double whatever you give me. But how are we supposed to eat while you're gone if I give you all of my money? You better get out there and make some more if eating is so important to you. Don't think I don't know you're out there selling drugs. The only reason you ain't in jail right now is because I ain't decided to call the cops on your ass yet." Talk of going to jail always scared Tracy, and his mother knew it. The last thing he wanted to do was end up like his father. Tracy headed upstairs to his room on the 3rd floor to get the money for his mother. Tracy got to his room and moved a few things around just in case his mom was downstairs listening. The last thing he wanted was for her to find out where his stash was hidden at. Tracy quickly climbed out the window and headed up to the roof where he kept his stash hidden inside a small wall of bricks. He pulled out his money and counted it, even though he already knew how much was there. He had $500 saved up. Tracy took $300 out and put it in his pocket, then buried the rest back where it had been at. Tracy was no dummy. He wasn't going to give his mom all of his money. He knew that the $300 that he was going to give her was $300 that he would never get back from her. Brian got off the 39 bus at 10th and Susquehanna Avenue, and like always, his number one homie Madman was standing right there waiting for him. Madman noticed that Brian's clothes were wrinkled like he'd been in a fight or something. "What the fuck happened to you?" "Had to fuck some nut-ass nigga up after school today." Madman shrugged. That was normal shit to hear that Brian had been in a fight. He fought someone damn near every day. Monman and Brian headed to the corner store to steal a few snacks. When they came out of the store, Madman couldn't wait to share his good news with Brian. "Hey, Bird, guess what school I'm going to in the fall?" Brian was called Bird by all of his close friends and family because he'd always had a love for pigeons ever since he was small, but his nickname would take on a whole different meaning later on in his life. "You going to Edison, right?" Madman shook his head and smiled. "Nope, I'm going to Dobbins." Dobbins was one of the top vocational schools in North Philly at the time. Most people wanted to go to Dobbins because of the many shops and programs they had to offer. Dobbins didn't accept just anyone, though. You needed good grades to be accepted. Brian was surprised that a slacker like Madman had managed to get in. "Dobbins? How the fuck that happened?" "I took the test last year. I ain't tell nobody because I thought that I was going to fail. But it looks like I'm gonna be headed to Dobbins in the fall, and they got all the bitches." Deep down inside, Brian was jealous. He knew that he would have easily got accepted to the school if he'd only took the test like he knew he should have. He had no one to blame for that but himself. One thing he did know for sure, though, was that there was no way that he would even consider going to Edison now. The only reason he even wanted to go there in the first place was because that was where he assumed his ace madman would be going. Monman's getting accepted to Dobbins had made Brian's choice of which high school he wanted to attend in the fall a very easy one now. He was definitely going to put his best foot forward when he went to interview for Bach. Trey fed his little brothers and put them to bed before he got ready to go hit the block and go get some money. Trey's old head Ray had dropped him off a G-Pack, $1,250, and he planned on knocking all of that off tonight. That would be $250 for him if he did, and he would be able to replace most of the money he gave his mother earlier today. Trey put a little more than half of the $1,250 worth of caps in a large sandwich bag and placed the bag under the couch cushion. He figured that there was no need to be standing on the corner with a whole G-Pack in his pockets. If he needed more, he could just run back to the crib. Trey hustled 2 blocks away from his house. The block was rocking from the moment Tracy stepped out there, and he was out hustling everyone on the corner. Trey sold the $500 worth of caps he had in his pockets in an hour and a half. Trey couldn't believe his luck. If things kept going this way, he would be completely sold out before 1 a.m. Trey ran back to his house to get some more caps. He knew something was wrong the minute he hit his block. There were police cars and ambulances everywhere. As Trey took a closer look, he realized that all of the traffic was right at his front door. Trey started to sprint for his house when somebody grabbed him from behind. It was Keisha. She was the next-door neighbor and one of Trey's mom's bar buddies. "You can't go down there, Trey." "Why not? I gotta see if my brothers are all right." Keisha hugged Trey tightly before she told him what happened. Lil Dave swallowed some caps. They don't know how many he swallowed, and they are taking him to the hospital. Lil Dave was Tracy's 6-year-old little brother, and knowing him, seeing the caps in the sandwich bag, he probably thought that it was some type of candy. Lil Dave loved candy. Tracy looked up at Keisha with tears in his eyes. "Is he gonna die?" "I don't know. They took him to the hospital. DHS took Mike, and if you go down there, the police are going to take you, because I'm pretty sure that those were your caps that Lil Dave swallowed." Keisha took her key ring out of her pocket and removed one key from the ring. She handed the key to Trey. "When the cops and everybody else leave, use this key to open up my back door. I know your mom is in Atlantic City and I'm going to try to get in touch with her, but you can stay with me until she gets back." Tracy took the key and started to head back where he came from. He started crying for his little brothers. He started to cry even harder when he realized how quickly his whole life had just fallen apart. He couldn't go back to the corner. If he ran into old head Ray, he was sure that he was going to be killed for not having all of his product or his money. He knew for a fact that Ray had killed people for much less. He couldn't go to Keisha's house because he was sure that his mom was going to kill him whenever she came home. He had to go somewhere though. He couldn't afford to be caught out here standing around and risk being snatched up by DHS, or even worse, the police. Tracy truly felt as if he was all alone in the world right now. But on the good side, he did have about $500 in his pockets right now, minus all the shorts he'd taken tonight, of course. Tracy walked to crackhead Diane's house. He was sure that he'd be able to rent a room in her house for a few nights. It was crazy how much life could change in just a few short hours. Earlier today, Tracy's biggest problem in life had been that he'd had a draw in a fight with a light-skinned dude. Brian stepped off the bus Friday morning expecting a fight the minute he stepped foot off of the bus. To his surprise, there was no sign of Tracy at the bus stop. That was unusual. Tracy and his friends always hung out there before school. Brian shrugged and headed toward the school. He was sure that he would bump into Tracy at school because they were in damn near every class together. To his surprise, he didn't see Tracy anywhere. After a while, Brian forgot about Tracy and went on with his regular daily routine. Miss Powell was true to her word. She got Brian an appointment to interview for Bach. They were so impressed by Brian that they offered to accept him into Bach right away. Brian called his mom from the school and she excitedly informed the principal that it was okay with her if Brian attended Bach in the fall. Miss Powell was ecstatic. She treated Brian to lunch after the interview. She was almost as proud of him as his own mother was. Brian started to get excited about attending Bach in the fall also. He put his dreams of being a criminal in his rearview mirror. Brian was now striving to do something positive with his life. Brian didn't see Tracy again until the middle of April when the 8th grade class was set to take their class trip to Washington, D.C. Brian was ready for a fight as he boarded the bus that was taking the class to Washington. He took a seat all the way in the back of the bus and watched as Tracy headed his way. Tracy sat down in the seat directly in front of him and said nothing. He didn't look like himself. Brian could clearly see that there was something else going on in Tracy's world. As all of the kids excitedly spoke loudly to each other, Tracy sat there quietly looking out the window. He didn't say one word to anyone the whole trip. Brian forgot all about Tracy and whatever was going on with him when his middle school crush, Yvette, sat down next to him and sparked up a conversation. He'd had a crush on Yvette since the first time he saw her. He could never get up the courage to say anything to her besides hello in his whole time at Conway. Now here she was, sitting next to him, telling him that she liked his Adidas sweatsuit and his white-on-white shell-top Adidas sneakers. Brian didn't tell her that the sweatsuit and sneakers belonged to his older brother, but he managed to keep the conversation going. Before he knew what had happened, he found himself kissing Yvette in the back of the bus, and the two of them agreeing to spend the day in Washington together. When the students arrived in D.C., the teachers told the students to meet back at the bus at 2:30 p.m. sharp. The students broke out into groups of their friends and headed off to see the sights of D.C. Tracy and his homies headed out, looking as if they were searching for some trouble to get into. Yvette grabbed Brian's hand, and the two headed off their own way, kissing each other every 5 minutes as they walked. The more time Brian spent with Yvette, the more that he was sure that she was the girl he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. As always, time flies when you're spending time with someone you really like, and before they both knew what happened, it was time to head back to the bus. Brian and Yvette stopped at one of the food trucks to get themselves a fruit salad to share before they got back on the bus. As they waited in line, Brian heard a commotion coming from across the street. As he took a closer look, he could see that Tracy was right in the middle of the commotion. He was getting his ass whipped by 4 much bigger dudes. Brian was pissed off when he saw Tracy's homies standing around looking and not helping him. If it was one thing Brian hated, it was friends who weren't willing to help another friend in a fight. He always wondered how people like that could consider themselves someone's friend. Brian ran across the street and jumped right into the fight to help Tracy. It would make for a good story if I told you that the two of them whipped the 4 bigger boys, but that wasn't what went down. Them 4 boys whipped Brian and Tracy like they were runaway slaves. After a while, the 4 bigger boys ran off laughing. Brian laid on the ground and looked at his sneakers. His shells were dicked. His brother Rome was going to whip his ass when he got home for wearing his clothes and messing them up. Tracy got up off of the ground, nodded at Brian, and walked away. Yvette helped Brian to his feet. They both watched as Tracy's friends tried to lie and say they helped him out too. Tracy told his friends to get the fuck away from him before he beat the shit out of them. Back on the bus, Brian tried to concentrate on kissing Yvette, but he couldn't stop thinking about Tracy's ungrateful ass. That selfish motherfucker didn't even have the common decency to say thanks. The more Brian thought about it, the madder he became. And when his anger got the best of him, he told Yvette he would be right back. Brian walked over and sat down next to Tracy, who was looking out the window staring at nothing in particular. At first, Brian just looked at him. After a few seconds, he nudged Trey on the shoulder. "Hey, man, don't you got something you want to say to me?" Tracy looked Brian up and down. "Nigga, what the fuck you want from me?" "A thank you will work." Tracy laughed at Brian. "Nigga, I don't owe you nothing. If I owe you anything, you better duck." Brian shook his head and laughed to himself. "You could at least tell me what them dudes jumped you for." Tracy breathed heavily. He really wasn't feeling up to having a conversation with this asshole. But he figured the sooner he answered him, the sooner he would get the fuck away from him and leave him alone. One of them niggas said I stole their watch. Brian was confused. Tracy was known for coming to school with his pockets full of money. Why the hell would he steal somebody's watch? Man, I see you with a fat ass knot every day at lunch. Why the hell would somebody think you stole their watch? Tracy looked at Brian and then dug into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a watch and smiled. Because I did. They both started cracking up. The more the two talked, the more they both realized that they had a lot more in common than they thought. The two were enjoying talking to each other so much that Brian temporarily forgot that he'd left Yvette in the back of the bus. She didn't forget, though. After a few more minutes, she came over and grabbed Brian by the hand and made him come back to the back of the bus with her. The next morning, when Brian got off of the bus to go to school, Tracy was right there at the bus stop as usual, but his friends were nowhere to be found. Tracy had cut the cowards loose. Him and Brian began hanging together that day, and the two became inseparable for the rest of the school year. If you ever saw one of them, the other was with him or not too far behind. Summer 1985. Brian and Tracy remained tight after graduating from Conwell. Tracy started hanging out in Brian's neighborhood with him and Man Man. The three of them played basketball all day. They were on the same team in Hearthands/Veterans Playground Summer League. Nights were a different story for the trio. At nighttime, they were always looking for some trouble to get into. They spent most of their nights committing strong armed robberies around the neighborhood. Their favorite targets were people who came stumbling out of the local bars late at night. They were usually too drunk to put up any kind of a fight. As the three started to commit and get away with more and more robberies, their confidence started to grow, and they began searching for bigger scores. They started to travel uptown and robbed people for their chains and hats. But after almost getting locked up during a robbery, they decided that robbing people uptown was a little too risky for them. They needed something big that had a small risk of being caught. The idea for their big score came when Brian noticed that the sneaker store on Germantown Avenue had a fire escape in the back alleyway. The three of them sat in the alley for hours every night, trying to plot out the best way to break into the sneaker store. Whenever they went into the sneaker store in the daytime to act like they were buying some sneakers, they noticed that the workers always went upstairs to the second floor to get people's sneakers for them to try on or buy. Brian knew right away that meant the second floor housed all of the store's sneakers. The only problem with that was there was no way to get up to the fire escape in the back of the alley. There were no stairs or anything. The fire escape was basically just a little balcony that didn't go anywhere. Brian noticed that the bank next door to the sneaker store could possibly be climbed. Maybe if you propped something up against the wall and climbed up that, then grabbed onto a few wires, you might be able to make your way up to the roof of the bank, and then make a nice-sized leap over to the roof of the sneaker store. It was dangerous, but to the trio, it was a risk well worth taking. They weren't afraid of the climb, jump, or break in. The part about the plan that scared them the most was the myth that if you even touched the walls of the bank, the alarm would go off. After that happened, the cops would be there in a matter of seconds. The three put their fears to the side and climbed up the bank's back wall. They made it up to the roof pretty easily and prepared to get a running start so they could make the long jump over to the roof of the sneaker store. The three cleared the jump easily. When they got to the sneaker store's roof, they noticed that there was a part of the roof that was made of glass. If they broke that out, they could just drop down into the second floor of the store. Tracy kicked a part of the glass in and was first to jump down into the second floor of the store. Brian and Man followed behind him. All three boys smiled when they saw the mountains of sneakers neatly piled up and arranged by the sizes. Tracy and Man immediately started grabbing boxes of sneakers to their sizes. Brian stopped them. "What the fuck are y'all doing?" Man looked at Brian like he was crazy. "I don't know about Trey, but I'm looking for a pair of Air Force Ones and some red and white forums." Brian shook his head. "Why?" "What you mean, why? So I can have some fresh kicks, nigga." Brian laughed at him. "All these grab some bigger sizes and sell them to the old heads around the way who hustle and make all kinds of money. Even if we sell $80 sneakers for $40, we still make bank. You niggas be thinking too small. Tracy stopped looking through boxes and joined in on the conversation. Yeah, but how are 3 people supposed to carry a bunch of boxes of sneakers? Brian thought about it for a minute. Mon, run and get that shopping cart that we saw sitting in the alley on Hutchinson Street and bring it to the alley. Trey, you go up on the roof. I'ma pass boxes up to you and you throw them down to Man. When we finished, we can stash the sneakers in the abandoned house next door to mine. Every time we sell a pair to somebody, we'll split the money evenly. Mon grabbed 2 boxes for himself before he headed off to do as he was told. They cleaned the sneaker store out. Every time they filled the shopping cart up with boxes, they went to the stash house to drop them off, and then came right back to the store for more. The 3 of them never said anything to anyone about the robbery. They spent the rest of the summer selling brand new sneakers for half price all around the neighborhood. The 3 thieves had built a strong bond over the summer.
Chapter 2, Stepping into Manhood.
This is chapter 2. We're going to go back. Okay. This is chapter 2. We're going to get into chapter 2. But I'm going back to the question. Do you believe in karma? And I said, I do. I believe in karma like a motherfucker. I believe if you do good, good gonna come back to you, and I believe that shit also goes the other way. I believe in karma in both ways. I'm gonna try to chapter 2 is
Fall.
Chapter 2 is about 17 minutes of this was I really coming together with the commission and all that shit. This is right here.
1985. When school rolled around, of course, Bird was going to school on his first day wearing some fresh kicks. He also copped himself some fresh gear to wear with the money they made over the summer selling the sneakers they stole. Bird stepped off of the 47 bus and walked into the hallway of Edward Bach High School, looking fresh to death. Now that the school was filled with students, it looked much bigger than it had the day he came here for his interview with Miss Powell. Bach was huge compared to Conwell. As Bird walked the hallways of the school, he wondered if anyone had ever got lost and wasn't found until days later in this big-ass school. After 10 minutes of searching, he finally found his homeroom, and he was late. The first day, the first class, and he was late. Bird shook his head. Not a great way to start your time at high school. Bird sighed loudly before he opened the door to the classroom. As he walked into the room, he could feel every pair of eyes in the classroom looking at him. He walked over to the teacher's desk and handed him his roster. Mr. Ragone looked at the roster and told Bird to take a seat in the back of the classroom. Bird looked at the faces of the students as he walked to his seat in the back of the room. Even though he'd always preferred being a loner at school, he had to admit that this kinda sucked. He had no one to talk to, and he was not the type of person to approach new people. He usually waited until someone said something to him. As the day went on and he went from class to class, Bird really liked what the school had to offer academically, but this wasn't a school that he could see himself attending for the next 4 years. It just didn't feel like it was the right fit for him. When the bell rang for the day to be over, Bird was excited. He couldn't wait to get back to the hood and be around some familiar faces. Bird made his way out of the building and started walking toward the bus stop. He was stopped by an older boy. "Hey, where are you from, homie?" Bird didn't really think much of the simple question. He figured the guy was probably someone who'd been going to the school for a few years or lived around here and was curious about the new face at the school because the guy was looking very comfortable in his surroundings. "I'm from North Philly." The guy looked at his homies and smiled before he spoke. "Oh, this is your unlucky day today, homie. Today is whip a North Philly nigga's ass day." Before Bird could react, the dude sucker punched him. He made the mistake of not following up on the sucker punch, and Bird took full advantage. dropped his books and threw a flurry of punches at Homeboy. His opponent was caught totally by surprise and was unable to block the onslaught of punches that were coming his way. He balled up and put his hands over his head as Bird wailed on him. Bird felt a punch hit him on the side of the head. He turned and started swinging that way. Before he knew what happened, the punches were coming from everywhere. Bird was quickly overwhelmed. He was getting jumped by 6 people, and even though an opportunity for him to run presented itself, Bird stayed there and fought. He got his ass whipped, but he fought. When Bird got home from school and told Man and Trey what happened, they wanted to go up to the school to get some revenge right away. Bird told them that it didn't make sense to go back to the school today because everyone was most likely gone by now. They would get their revenge tomorrow. When Bird told his brother Aiden what happened to him, Aiden told him that he was driving him to the school tomorrow to look for the boys that jumped him. Bird stayed home from school the next day. So did Trey and Mon. At 1 p.m., Aiden came and picked them up in his Cadillac, followed by 3 more Cadillacs full of Aiden's Franklin Street homies. They rode up to Bach High School in South Philly, 4 cars deep. They waited outside the school until school let out for the day. When school let out, Bird didn't see the dude that sucker punched him yesterday, and he never really got a good look at any of the other guys who had jumped him. Aiden decided that he wasn't leaving here until somebody got their ass whipped, and Aiden, Bird, Mon, Trey, and the Franklin Street boys started teeing off on everyone in the area. Whoever didn't come with them was getting swung on. Boys, girls, it really didn't matter to them, and when the teachers started coming out of the school to break up the fights, they teed off on them too. Teachers, principals, security guards, everybody that came anywhere near them was getting straight work that afternoon. When the police finally arrived, everyone took off running. Bird was the only one to get caught. He wasn't charged with any crime, but he was expelled from Bach High School. With no other options on the table, it was beginning to look like Bird would be attending Thomas Edison High School this year after all. Bird's first day at Edison was the complete opposite of his first day at Bach. Edison was the neighborhood high school. Bird knew a bunch of people from the hood who went there. Now this was a school that felt like somewhere he could see himself spending the next 4 years at. The fact that he knew a bunch of people at the school wasn't even the best thing about Edison. They got out of school at 1:18 p.m. That was right up Bird's alley. Thomas Edison High School was wide open. What that meant was that there really wasn't much that you did out in the streets that you could not do inside the school. Gamble, smoke weed, sell drugs, have sex, everything was a go at Edison. People didn't even get suspended for fighting. The teachers just broke up the fight and sent everyone on their way. Edison didn't have any vocational courses or accelerated classes, but the lack of education was a fair trade for all of the fun that went on at Edison in Bird's mind. Bird quickly found a little squad that he hung out with daily. They got into a regular routine of smoking weed and gambling at school all day every day. Bird's 4-man squad was made up of himself, Puerto Rican Javier from Clearfield Street, Ant-Man from 12th and Huntington, and JB, the wannabe pimp, from up 25th and Lehigh. Bird always wondered how JB had pulled off going to the school when Edison wasn't even his neighborhood high school. JB was the only one in the squad that lived crosstown. Bird's whole high school squad of homies sold drugs except for him. Bird, Trey, and Man were still doing petty robberies and burglaries. Ant-Man sold a little crack for himself and seemed to be doing pretty well. JB sold crack here and there for anyone in his hood who was willing to give him some work. Javier was different. Javier came from a family of big-time drug dealers, and he was the heir apparent to the throne. He would have been the boss of the family right now if his dad hadn't passed over him and gave the business to his brother when he got locked up. Javier always talked about robbing his uncle. Bird always assumed that he was just talking shit and blowing off steam. That was until the day Javier pulled Bird to the side and asked him if he would help him take his uncle under. Bird told Javier that he would give him an answer in a few days after he talked it over with his partners. Bird told Man and Trey about the lick that very same day when he got home from school, as the three sat in the abandoned house next to Bird's house, which had now become their unofficial headquarters. Bird looked at Man and Trey after he finished telling them about Javier's plan. So what y'all think? Trey was the first one to answer. I'm in, as long as it's not a waste of my time. Javier said that we should be splitting at least $100,000. I ain't never known Javier to be a liar. Mon Man had a worried look on his face as he listened. The huge amount of money sounded like a lie, but that wasn't the part that he was worried about. He decided to add his 2 cents to the conversation. But his nigga's gonna be strapped in there though. We don't even got no guns or nothing. From what Javier told me, no one should be home when we go up in there. So it should be more of a burglary than a robbery. Bird checked the reaction on Mon's face as he told him that part. He hated to have to lie to Man, but he knew that he would probably bitch up if he told him that the job was most likely going to be a dangerous one. Bird had no idea if there would be guns involved or not. Bird needed both of his people in on this lick, because Javier was already talking about bringing in more people. Bird wasn't trying to have more heads involved to have to break the money down with. 4 people should be more than enough heads to get the job done, even if there were people inside the house packing heat. Bird went to school the next day and told Javier that they were in. Javier told Bird that he was going to get his mother to get his uncle out of the house for a few hours, so no one should be at home when they go up in there. When Bird asked Javier if he was going to supply them with guns just in case shit went bad, Javier assured him that it wouldn't. He also said he wouldn't be packing a gun either. Bird wasn't really buying it, but he wasn't going to walk away from $100,000 either. For the whole week leading up to the job, Bird was feeling like he shouldn't take Man on the job with him. Everything wasn't for everybody, and Bird knew Mon long enough to know that he wasn't built for this type of work. He knew Trey loved shit like this, but Mon was a different story. Bird started trying to come up with a way to tell Man that he couldn't go on the job with him without hurting his feelings. When Man began getting so excited about doing the job, Bird couldn't get up the heart to tell him that he thought he was too soft for this kind of shit. Man would have been crushed. When Friday came, the 3 met with Javier at his house at 10 p.m. Javier went over the plan with everybody one last time. Look, we're gonna kick in the back door and head straight for the basement. That's where the coke and money is at. All of us are going to have to go inside because there's going to be a lot of shit to carry. Javier rubbed his hands together excitedly as he was speaking. Bird thought about Javier's plan for a second. This shit was simple. It was too simple-minded for Bird's liking. This shit wasn't going to work for him. Hey Javi, do the basement have windows that face the front of the house? Yeah. Well, I think we should leave a lookout across the street from the house so they can whistle and let us know if somebody might be coming into the house. Javier smiled and patted Bird on the back. That's a good-ass idea, homie. Bird turned around and looked at Man. That's your job. Make sure you whistle loud enough for us to hear if you see someone coming into the house. Man nodded. He didn't even peep that Bird was trying to give him as little involvement in this shit that he could think of. Man was just happy to be a part of the whole thing. The 4 headed over to Javier's uncle's house around the corner. Man took his place across the street from the front of the house while Javier, Bird, and Trey headed around to the back of the house. Trey kicked the back door in with one hard blow. The 3 rushed inside and headed straight for the basement. When they got to the basement, Javier headed straight for the back. He immediately started moving some boxes and shit around. After a minute, he kicked one of the boxes and threw his hands in the air in disgust. Javier looked at Bird. Fuck, I ain't here. That fat fucker must have moved it. We gotta spread out and look for the shit. I know it's in this basement somewhere. Trey started to search under the stairs, and Bird walked off to the far end of the basement and started searching over there. Javier took a quick peek to make sure that Bird and Trey were occupied. Once he was satisfied that they were, he bent down and quickly started stuffing the pockets of his coat, hoodie, and pants with items. He went back to moving the boxes around, pretending like he was looking for something. Bird stopped what he was doing when he heard a whistle coming from outside. He ran to the window and looked out to see if Man was the person who was out there whistling. When Bird looked out the window and him and Man made eye contact, Man began pointing at the front door. Someone was coming into the house. It was much too late for them to make a break for the back door, so the 3 of them stood there quietly listening to the footsteps above their heads. They listened instant as the footsteps got close to the back door and then the door to the basement. Whoever it was upstairs must have took a look at the kicked-in back door. Bird held his breath, hoping that whoever it was wouldn't come into the basement next. That's exactly what they did. Bird dashed and hid under the stairs with Tracy. Javier just stood where he was. Trey looked at Bird and whispered, "What the fuck is he doing?" Bird shrugged and kept looking forward at Javier. Bird saw feet on the steps. He heard the person who the feet belonged to speak a few seconds later when he saw Javier standing there. "Hey, you scared the shit out of me. What the hell you doing down here? Did you know somebody kicked my father's back door?" He never got to finish what he was saying because Javier pulled his gun out and shot him in the chest 2 times. Bird looked on in horror as he watched the body drop. He came from under the steps and got right up in Javier's face. "What the fuck did you do that for?" Javier had just made them an accessory to a murder, and now he had the nerve to be standing here not saying shit. After a few seconds, Javier snapped out of the little trance he was in. "Come on, we gotta get the fuck out of here." Javier ran and headed up the stairs. Trey ran to the window and whistled, signaling to Man that it was time to bounce and meet up back at Javier's house. Bird waited until Trey finished whistling out the window. Then him and Trey ran up the stairs and out the back door. Javier had panicked and killed his 14-year-old cousin Angel in cold blood. He really didn't even have to do that. Angel had no idea that Javier had been there to rob the place. When the 4 of them got back to Javier's house, Javier gave Bird, Trey, and Man $2,500 apiece. He told Bird that he was going to give them some coke in a week. He told them that he found $20,000 in the basement and a quarter-pound of coke. Javier told them that if they gave him a week to flip the quarter-pound he'd found, he would break them off a quarter-pound of their own for them to share. Bird, Trey, nor Man had ever had $2,500 of their own in their hands before. They were more than happy to have the money, not to mention that they would have some coke coming from Javier in a week, and they would be able to go into business for themselves. None of them suspected that Javier had pulled a fast one on them. Javier found 2 kilos of coke and $69,000 cash in the basement. Javier had spotted the stash spot the moment he walked into the basement. He stood there faking like he had no idea where the shit was, when he was standing right in front of it the whole time, hiding it from Bird and Trey's sight as he directed them to search elsewhere. Javier was expecting to find much more in the basement, and he knew it was down there. He just hadn't had enough time to thoroughly search the joint. Javier could have easily done this job by himself. Bird, Trey, and Man were bought in on the job just to be his fall guys for the robbery. His plan was to give the 3 of them up to his uncle in the hopes that he might be able to get in good with him and move up the family's ladder. Him killing Angel had fucked his plans all the way up. Javier was a grimy-ass dude, but he wasn't grimy enough to try to frame someone else for a murder that he'd done. There was no way that he could tell his uncle about the robbery now. Javier had to take this money and coke he found and try to come up on his own. Javier planned to give his mom some of the coke he found. He hoped that giving her some coke would keep her quiet because she was the only other person who knew that he was the person who'd done the robbery. Chapter 3. Getting Organized.
Chapter 3, that's the last one. And still in it. The question of the day, night, evening is, do you believe in karma? Yes or no, or you can add why you do or why you don't. Just, do you believe in karma? I do. This is chapter 3, getting organized.
January 1986. Bird, Man, and Trey had done the robbery with Javier a few days before Christmas. It was now the middle of January, and Javier had not given them the coke they were owed yet. Bird wasn't really pressed for the money. He'd spent less than $500 of his money from the robbery, but Trey and Man were both pretty much broke already. He knew that the reason that Tracy was broke was because he'd used a big portion of his money to find a place to live at. Tracy had been staying at the crackhead Diane's house since that first night he went there. He couldn't wait to get up enough money to get a place of his own. That was understandable. Unlike Tracy, Man really had no logical explanation for running through his money so fast. The only thing that Bird had any idea that Man bought with his money was his rope chain, and he paid $1,000 for that. Bird couldn't understand why Man would spend damn near half of his money from the robbery on a chain, but he didn't say anything about it. That was Man's money to blow any way that he wanted to, and he was owed some more. All of them were owed more. Bird knew that since he was the one who'd introduced them to Javier, it was up to him to get what they were owed from him. Bird had a feeling that Javier was going to give him another lame-ass excuse when he went to see him about the money. He hated to have to fuck Javier up because they were cool, but he owed his squad some money. Bird's loyalty was to his squad, so it had to be what it had to be. Bird had to put his plans to go pay Javier a visit on hold because the squad had run into a much bigger problem. A problem that needed to be taken care of ASAP. From the minute that Man got that $2,500 in his hands, he started thinking that he was someone famous or important. And when he went to Mike's jewelry shop on Germantown and Erie Avenue and bought that big-ass rope chain, no one could tell Man shit. He thought the chain automatically gave him some kind of status, like someone wouldn't try him for his chain or something. Man didn't have a gun and couldn't really fight, but he walked the streets of North Philly flexing with his big-ass chain on like he was some type of tough guy. The moment that Bird saw Man with the chain on, he thought to himself that Man was drawing by wearing that big-ass chain around. Even if he would have told Man that he wouldn't have been trying to hear that shit, he was the center of attention everywhere he went at, and Man loved that kind of shit. On an unusually warm day in January, when everybody was out on the block, Man got robbed for his chain while walking home from his girlfriend's house on 8th and Diamond Street. Crazy Troy robbed him in front of the world to see. Crazy Troy was from Fairhill Projects. He walked the neighborhood with his double-barrel shotgun tucked underneath his Woolrich coat in the wintertime. Troy robbed whoever he wanted to in the neighborhood, whenever he wanted to. Troy snorted cocaine every day. The cocaine gave Troy the heart to do a lot of things that the average person wouldn't. For some reason, most people in the hood would rather be cool with Troy than to go up against him. Troy's reputation helped him to get away with a lot of dirt, and when Troy robbed people, they usually didn't do shit about it. The few who did found themselves full of bullet holes. Nobody in the hood wanted any types of trouble from Troy, and he bullied everyone. Troy was about 35 years old, and honestly a little too old to be doing the kind of shit he was doing to the youngsters in the hood, but Troy didn't care. He was going to keep getting this free money until somebody in the hood had the heart to try to stop him. Before the internet was born, word traveled by the Hood News Report. The Hood News Report traveled faster than the internet ever could. Before Man even made it the 4 blocks to Bird's house to tell him what had happened to him, Bird had already heard about it. Ass Jamila told Bird that Troy had robbed Man for his chain and didn't even pull his gun out on him. He slapped Man like he was a bitch, took the chain off his neck and the money out of his pockets. She said that Mom cried too. Bird was steaming mad. Everyone in the hood knew that him and Man were tight and hung together, so it was like Man was representing him and Tracy also. If Man stood there and let Troy take his chain without doing shit, then the hood would start to think that they all were pussies because they hung together. Bird had to do something and do it soon. Bird hit up his stash and went to pay the old head Alfonso a visit. It was rumored that Alfonso was sitting on over $1 million from dope money he made back in the 60s and 70s. He never moved out of the hood, and he was always selling this and that. If you ever needed to discreetly buy any kind of stolen goods, then Al probably had it or knew someone who could get it for you. Al never did business with youngsters, though. He said that they were too wild and would bring heat to him if he sold them anything. Bird walked to Al's house on 13th and Cumberland Street and knocked on the door. A woman answered the door. Bird asked for Al, and the woman led him into the house and told Bird to take a seat. The inside of Al's house was like an episode of Hoarders. He had shit everywhere. There was barely room to walk around in Al's house. A few minutes after Bird sat down, Al came walking down the stairs wearing a house robe and a pair of Timberland boots. He stood right in front of Bird. "What you need, youngin'?" Bird heard him, but his attention was on the female that was walking down the stairs, butt-ass naked. She looked like she couldn't have been any older than 21 or 22. Bird wondered what the fuck she was doing with old-ass Al. As Bird looked around, he noticed that she wasn't the only young chick walking around naked or half-naked in this bitch. Al smiled when he saw Bird eyeballing his livestock. Oh, you want some of that? Bird regained focus when he heard Al talking to him. Nah, man, I need a piece. Al frowned. A piece of what, lil nigga? Bird put his finger up and made a motion of him pulling the trigger. Al looked at him like he was crazy. Oh, hell no. I don't sell no motherfucking guns, nigga. Get your little ass the fuck out of my house. Bird couldn't afford to leave here without getting a gun. This was the only place he knew that he could possibly buy one from. Look, old head, I'll make a deal with you. I'll give you double whatever you want for the gun. Al rubbed his chin as he thought about it for a minute. Nah, lil nigga, that ain't no deal. That little money ain't gonna keep me out of jail when your young ass get locked up and snitch on me. I ain't gonna snitch on you, and I ain't getting locked up. I'll tell you what, man. I got some coke coming to me in a few days. I'll pay the price you want for the gun and give you an ounce of coke when I pick up what I got coming. And I'll give you another $1,000 to hold for collateral until I bring you the ounce of coke. Al had plenty of money, but he never turned down a good deal. He sold Bird a .380 for $250. Even though he was already making a huge profit by getting an ounce of coke for free, he still got over on Bird. Al usually sold a .380 for no more than $150. Bird knew Al got over on him, but he didn't care. He had what he needed, and he was now ready to do what needed to be done. Bird ran to his house and grabbed his ski mask. He headed for the projects. Bird knew exactly where to find Troy and his homies. They were usually sitting out on the benches snorting coke until nighttime hit. Bird walked to the parking lot in the back of the projects and peeked around the corner. Just like he thought, Troy and his homies were sitting on the benches snorting coke and sharing a 40 ounces of Old English 800. Bird put his ski mask on and walked right up behind Troy and his homies from behind. He pulled out his .380 and shot Troy twice in the back of the head. Troy's body dropped to the ground, but he wasn't dead. Bird pointed his gun at Troy's two homies, and they took off running. Bird looked down at Troy laying on the ground, flopping around like a fish out of water. He shot him in the chest 2 more times and kneeled down and removed Mon Man's chain from around his neck. Bird started to get up and run, but then he wondered what Troy might have in his pockets. Bird opened up Troy's Woolrich coat and took his shotgun. Then he searched Troy's pockets and found $500 and 4 bundles of caps. Bird made sure that he took everything Troy had in his pockets before he got up and ran off. Bird went back to their headquarters where Mon Man and Trey were there waiting for him. The two were putting a plan together to get back at Troy for robbing Mon Man. Bird looked at both of them when he walked into the back room of the abandoned house. What y'all doing? Trey looked up at Bird. We putting a plan together to get back at that bitch-ass nigga Troy. My homie Mel said he gonna get me a gun tonight. We gon' go see that bitch nigga tonight. Bird laughed at them and opened up his coat. He sat the shotgun on the table in front of them. Then he pulled Man's chain out of his pocket and handed it to him. Bird didn't have to tell them that Troy was dead. Everybody knew you would have to kill Troy to get that shotgun from him. Without any words needing to be said, everybody in the room knew that Bird was now the leader of their 3-man gang, or crew, or whatever the hell you wanted to call it. Bird gave Mon Man and Trey $150 apiece. He also gave Trey the shotgun. Bird then broke the 4 bundles of caps down with them. He gave Trey $150 worth of caps and gave Mon Man $150 worth of caps. He told both of them to pay someone to sell the caps for them. Bird already planned on giving his share of the caps to JB to sell for him when he went back to school Monday. Bird, Trey, and Mon Man walked down to 8th and Diamond Street and stood on the corner so that everybody who saw Man get robbed earlier could see that he had his chain back. And once people found out that Troy was laying in the back of the projects dead, everyone would get the message that they weren't the ones for the dumbass shit. and no one would ever take anything from them and live long enough to enjoy it. Now that the business with Mon was done and over with, Bird had one more piece of unpleasant business to take care of. He needed to go see Javier and get what was owed to them, and he was scared. Not of Javier. He was a pussy, and Bird knew it. He was scared of what he might do to Javier if things didn't go right when he saw him. Bird felt no remorse after he killed Troy, and he knew that he could easily kill again and not give a fuck about it. That was a scary thought. Bird woke up Saturday morning and got dressed. He made sure to tuck his .380 into the pocket of his jeans. He would be taking this with him everywhere he went until he bought a better one. Bird walked over to Silver Street on the other side of Lehigh Avenue, where it was rumored that Javier had took over. He doubted that Javier would be out there, but he hoped that someone would know where he was. There wasn't much traffic moving on the block. Bird wondered why so many people were standing around on this dead-ass block. He walked over to a Puerto Rican guy who was wearing a 76er starter jacket. "Hey man, you know where Javier at?" The guy looked Bird up and down. "Who wants to know?" Before Bird could answer him, a black BMW pulled up. Javier jumped out of the car smiling. "Bird, what's up, man? Where the fuck you been at?" Bird shook Javier's hand and smiled. "I've been around. You've been the one who's hard to find. You don't even come to school no more." Javier laughed. "Man, fuck school. That shit ain't nothing but a waste of my time. I got money to make and that school shit is in the way." Bird nodded. "I feel you, but look man, I came up here to get that thing you owe me. You ain't forget, did you?" "No man, I ain't forget. I ain't never gonna forget that y'all helped me out on that. I got you." Javier reached into his car and pulled out his big ass cell phone. He said a few words in Spanish and ended the call. He turned back to Bird. "It'll be here in 2 minutes. Bird, you gonna love this coke I got. I just got this shit straight from Bolivia, man." Bird tried to hold in his laugh. He was sure that Javier was lying. He listened as Javier continued. "You gonna sell this fast as shit. I guarantee you it ain't no coke around like this. Watch how fast you sell this shit." A green Honda Accord pulled up. The driver handed Javier a large sandwich bag and drove off. Javier passed the bag to Bird. "Here you go, B. 4.5, just like we agreed. When you off that, come back and see me. I can sell you quarter pounds for $3,100. You ain't gonna find a better price for coke this good." Bird put the bag in his coat pocket and shook Javier's hand. "I'm definitely gonna pay you a visit when I knock this off." Bird started to head up the block. He was happy that he had the coke and it was time to open up shop. By the time Bird got to Lehigh Avenue, reality set in. He realized that he really had no idea what to do with the coke. He didn't know how to cook it or bag it up or nothing, but he was pretty sure that Trey did. Bird was right in thinking that Trey knew what to do with the cocaine. Trey took Bird and Mon over to crackhead Diane's house. Diane was more than willing to cook the quarter pound for them. She wanted to drop the whole quarter pound in the pot and cook it. Bird didn't want to take the chance of the whole 4.5 ounces getting fucked up. He wanted to cook it ounce by ounce. Trey assured him that Diane knew what she was doing, and Bird finally gave in and agreed to let her drop the whole John in the pot. Bird weighed out 28 grams from the large sandwich bag and put it into a smaller sandwich bag. He passed the rest to Diane. She whistled and licked her lips when she saw the fish scale in the bag. Diane knew right away that they had a winner on their hands, and she told them so. The 28 grams that Bird took out the bag was the ounce that he owed the old head Al. Bird watched carefully and asked questions as Diane boiled the water in the pot, dropped the cocaine in, and mixed in some baking soda. In Bird's opinion, she was putting too much baking soda in there, but he didn't say anything. He planned on learning how to do this himself. He watched as she dropped ice cubes in and stirred the pot. Then he watched as the powdered cocaine formed into a perfect hardened pancake shape inside the pot. Diane pulled the pancake out of the pot and put it on the scale. 98 grams had went into the pot and 130 grams had come out after the cook. They made an extra ounce and some change from the cook, but but that didn't mean anything if the coke was garbage. Bird broke Diane off what probably would have been a $100 piece from the pancake and told her to test it out. She walked into the living room to take a blast and came back 2 minutes later tweaking. This was definitely some good-ass coke. Bird tried to pay Diane in cash for cooking the coke, but she didn't want it. She wanted some more of that good fish scale. Bird sent Man to Germantown Avenue to buy some empty cap vials, sandwich bags, and razor blades. Him and Trey went back to the headquarters with the coke and waited for Mon. Bird ran next door to his mom's house and grabbed a couple of her glass plates. When Mon came back from the avenue, Trey showed them how to bag up the coke. It wasn't a complicated process. Shave some, but not too much because crackheads like to smoke the rocks because they burn slower. Shaving some of the crack helped fill up the vials while using less coke and helped to stretch out the profit. And chop the rest of it up into small rocks, then use a straw to fill up the empty vials. Trey assured them that with the small 15 illusion vials they were using, that they would make bank. When they finished bagging up and counted everything they had, $6,400 worth of product. Now all they had to do was sell it.
Chapter 4. Forming the Squad. The three split up the coke evenly. They each took $2,000 worth of product with them. The plan was to use the $6,000 to buy more coke, and they would split up the $400 as spending money between themselves. They bagged up the bundles with 25 caps in each bundle. That meant whoever sold a bundle for them would make $25 for themselves and turn in the $100. If one of them sold a bundle themselves here and there, they would make a few dollars for themselves. Bird hoped that they would finish everything in less than a week, and he figured that by doing it this way, no one would be pressed for money and come up short on their portion of the re-up money when it was time to re-up, because there was $25 profit in each bundle. He was wrong. Trey took his portion of the coke and set up shop around his way. He set up shop right around the corner from where he used to hustle for Old Head Ray on 9th and Pike Street. Trey managed to catch a lot of Ray's customers as they were on their way to buy from Ray. Once they got a chance to sample what Trey was selling, they never went back to Ray. They became Trey's customers. Trey put his homies Martell and Vern on and started giving them bundles to sell for him. That was a mistake. Being as though Martell and Vern had been cool with Trey for years, they took advantage of their friendship. They never turned in $100 like they were supposed to. They usually turned in $90 or $85 or something like that. Every time Trey collected short money, he usually gambled with it or spent it on something. Trey was moving the product quickly on his corner, but he was fucking up most of the money. Mon took his portion of the coke and got his cousin Boo to move it for him on 4th and Dauphin Street. Boo hustled on a corner that was wide open, meaning nobody owned the corner. Yeah, I know I told you that. Wide open meant something else earlier in the story. Back in the day, wide open meant a lot of different things. It all mattered what context you used the phrase in. As long as you were from the neighborhood, you could hustle out there without getting harassed by anyone. Boo was 16 years old, and he was a true hustler. He was on the corner from sun up until sundown and beyond. The coke that Mon supplied Boo with was better than anything the smokers in the area had ever smoked before. Mon share of the coke was finished in less than 2 full days. Mon didn't tell Trey and Bird that he'd finished his portion though. Mon wanted to play Big Willie and go to school flashing his money around. The longer Mon had the money, the more money he spent. Meanwhile, all of Boo's customers were coming to him begging to buy some more of that good-ass coke, but Boo didn't have anything to sell them. His cousin had not bought him any more work to sell. The first thing Bird did after they bagged up the coke was walk to the Old Head Al's house. He gave Al the ounce he promised him and got his $1,000 that he left with Al for collateral back. Bird didn't really have a plan for selling his share outside of giving.
Hello. everybody is in the room. The question of the night is, do you believe in karma? Car- karma, yes or no? Do you believe in karma? Do you believe if you put good energy out there, you're going to receive good energy? Do you believe that if you put negative energy out there, you're going to receive negative energy? I believe karma goes both ways. You get good, you give good. You give bad, you get bad. That's just my opinion. I would like to hear yours. Well, see yours in the comment section. Please like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Back to the story.
giving most of it to JB to sell for him. But he couldn't do that until Monday when he went back to school. It was Saturday night, and Bird knew that there was money in the hood. He walked up and down 10th Street with a few bundles in his pockets. He randomly stopped people who looked like they smoked crack and gave them one of his vials. He gave away 10 vials altogether. The next thing he knew, people were coming back and bringing friends with them. Bird decided that he needed to be standing in one spot to make it easier for his new customers to find him. So he set up shop on the corner of Arizona Street. The closest people to him that sold crack was probably the projects, and they were a block or two away from where he set up his shop. He had the perfect spot. All he needed was some workers now. He could worry about that later though. For now, he figured he could sell a few bundles himself. Bird hit the corner of Arizona Street at 8 p.m. By 2 a.m., he had sold 7 bundles and could have sold more if he wasn't tired and decided to take it in for the night. By Monday morning, when he went back to school, he only had 5 bundles left. Bird looked around for JB and couldn't find him anywhere. He ran into Ant-Man, who told him that JB was out by the stairs that led to the back fire escape. That was where the students smoked their weed at. Bird walked to the fire escape and found JB sitting on the steps by himself. "Fuck you doing? You getting high by yourself now?" JB turned around and smiled. "Hell nah, nigga. I got 2 hoes about to come up here and take turns sucking me off." Bird bust out laughing. "Fuck out of here, you lying ass nigga. I got something for you though." Bird pulled 5 bundles out of his pocket and handed them to JB. "That's 5 right there. $125 apiece. Give me back $500. Bird started to walk away, and JB called him back. "Hey B, you ain't trying to get up on these hoes with me?" "I would if you wasn't lying, Ninga. Just wait 5 minutes and watch me work these hoes." Bird sat on the steps next to JB, and as sure as the sun is yellow, Layla and Tanya came walking up the stairs 5 minutes later. Both of them were seniors at Edison, but had the body and faces of 24-year-old, stacked booty models. JB called them Salt and Pepper. Light-skinned Layla was Salt, and the caramel complexion Tanya was the pepper. JB whispered something in Layla's ear, and she got on her knees and started unbuttoning Bird's pants. She gave him a blowjob that was so professional that when she was done, Bird started to hand her some money. JB stopped him. "If you feel like you want to pay somebody, you can give that dough to me." Bird looked at Layla. She didn't say anything. He knew that JB must have had some kind of hold on these hoes, because there was no way in hell that a chick was going to stand there and not say anything while someone took their money. Bird made a mental note of that. He pulled his pants up and gave JB the middle finger. He wasn't giving JB shit. Bird started walking down the steps and hollered back up to JB. "I'll pick that up tomorrow morning." JB happy hollered back down the steps. "It ain't gonna take that long. I may need some more tonight." Bird left school early to see if he could sell that $150 worth of product he still had that he'd taken from Troy's pockets the day he killed him. When he got to the corner, a bunch of customers were standing around like they'd been waiting for him. Bird sold what he had in a matter of minutes. He stayed around on the corner to let any customers who was looking to buy something know that he would have some more tomorrow or the day after. True to his word, JB got off the 23 trolley and walked to the corner 2.5 hours later. He handed Bird $500 and asked for some more bundles to sell. Bird told him that he would get at him tomorrow. He also made a mental note to himself to go up 25th Street with JB so he could see if the spot JB was hustling at was wide open. Bird was anxious for Mon to get home from school and Trey to hurry up and get here so they could put all of the money together and go re-up. He needed more product ASAP. While Bird was waiting for Mon Man and Trey to arrive, one of the old head Al's girls came to see him. She told him that Al wanted to talk to him. Bird told her to tell Al that he would swing by the house in a minute. When Trey and Mam finally got there, they both had nothing but bad news. They both had fucked up the money. They had exactly $500 between the both of them. They were supposed to be bringing $4,000 to the table between the both of them, and they were standing here with $500. Bird didn't even say anything. He just took the money and walked away, leaving them both standing there looking stupid. The re-up money was way short now, and Bird was going to have to hit up his personal stash just to be able to buy another £1/4 pound. Everybody had been balling irresponsibly except for him. As Bird walked to his house, he calmed down, and his brain started to formulate a plan. Everything wasn't for everybody, but that didn't mean that they couldn't get money together. Bird decided to go see what the old head Al wanted before he went to re-up with Javier. He walked to Al's house and knocked on the door. Al answered in his house robe and a pair of Timbs. Bird shook his head. He wondered if this old nigga ever wore any clothes. Al smiled when he saw Bird standing there. "What's up, youngster? Come on in." Al's whole attitude toward Bird had changed since the first time they met. That could only mean one thing. He wanted some type of favor or something. "I can't stay long. I got somewhere that I need to be." Bird walked inside and took a seat on the couch. 3 of Al's hoes were sitting around wide-eyed and smiling like they'd been waiting for him. Bird nodded in their direction and then looked at Al. "So what's up, old head? That's some good-ass coke you got. I want to buy some of that shit from you." Bird was instantly interested and thinking of some sort of a come-up. "How much you need?" "I want to get like 3 or 4 ounces of that same shit you gave me before." "Which one is it? 3 or 4? Al thought about it for a minute. "I want $4,800, and you're gonna have to wait 3 or 4 days if you want the same thing that I gave you before." Even though Bird had blurted out the first number that popped into his head, it was in a believable range. Al shrugged. "All right, so come back in 3 or 4 days and I'll have the money for you." Bird shook his head. That was not going to work for him. "No, old head, it don't work like that. You gotta pay for it up front and then my connect will bring the product in a few days. I'm about to order some more for myself too." Al looked at Bird like he was crazy. "Nigga, you really sitting here expecting me to give you $4,800 and I gotta wait 4 days to get my product?" "Yeah, if you want that good shit. I can go get you some garbage right now if you want though." Al thought about it for a minute. He did want that good shit. Al looked at one of his hoes. "Bitch, go upstairs and get me one of them rolls." The girl ran up the stairs and came back down in less than a minute with a roll of money in her hand. Al snatched the money from her and threw the roll to Bird. "Nigga, this is $5,000. Have my shit here in 4 days and not a day later. Don't make me have to come to your mom's house on 10th Street to find your young ass." Bird nodded and headed out the front door. He made a mental note of the fact that Al knew where him and his family lived. Everybody in the and concentrated on what his plan was. He got old ass Al back for charging him up for that gun. Not only did he charge Al up for the 4 ounces of coke, he also was going to flip his shit before he gave him his product. He was going to add the $4,800 that he got from Al to the $2,500 that they had from selling off the last quarter pound. That would make $7,300. He was going to put $700 to that from his stash and take the $8,000 to Javier and talk him into selling him 3/4 pounds for 8 stacks. Once he got the 3/4 pounds, he was going to cook all of that. Bert was pretty sure that he would be looking at over $20,000 in product after they bagged up the 3/4 pounds. Then he was going to take the first $3,100 that he sold back to Javier and get another 1/4 pound. Then he would give Al his 4 ounces and still have another 1/2 ounce for himself. He was basically going to use Al's money to help himself be able to buy more coke. Bert knew that in order to keep all of the money straight this time, he was going to need to make some changes to how things were ran. Everything was not for everybody, and selling drugs obviously wasn't in the cards for his 2 partners. They'd already proved that much.
That was chapter 4. I'm about to get something to eat, and like an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours, I'll play the rest. Or some more. I don't know if I'm going to hear the rest. I mean, if anybody has it.